Have you ever felt like life was throwing you curveballs? Like the universe was testing you? Well, you might be more right than you know. God, the universe, or whatever higher power you believe in, actually does test us. But these tests aren't like the ones you took in school. They're sneaky, they're tricky, and they can pop up when you least expect them. These tests from God can completely change your life, turn your world upside down, and help you grow in ways you never thought possible. And here's the kicker: they're not what you think they are. Most people go through life never realizing they're being tested. They face challenges, struggle through hard times, and wonder why things are so difficult. But what if I told you that these struggles, these hard times, are actually tests? Tests designed by God to see if you're ready for the next level of your spiritual journey. Tests to see if you're worthy of the blessings and responsibilities that come with spiritual growth. Now, you might be thinking, why would God test me? Isn't that a bit mean? But here's the thing. These tests aren't about punishment. They're not about making your life hard just for the sake of it. No, these tests are about growth. They're about pushing you to become the best version of yourself. They're like spiritual workouts designed to strengthen your faith, your character, and your connection to the divine. But here's the real kicker. Most people fail these tests without even realizing they were being tested in the first place. They miss out on incredible opportunities for growth and blessing because they didn't recognize the test for what it was. And that's why we're here today. We're going to pull back the curtain and reveal the 5 tests that God uses to see if you're worthy. By the end of this video, you'll be able to spot these tests a mile away, and you'll have the tools you need to pass them with flying colors. Now, let's talk about why recognizing and passing these tests is so important. Because let me tell you, the stakes are high. Really high. If we don't recognize these tests for what they are, if we don't understand what God is trying to teach us through them, we might miss out on some of the most important lessons of our lives. Think about it like this. Have you ever had a moment where you felt stuck? Like you were running on a hamster wheel, facing the same problems over and over again? Maybe it's relationships that keep falling apart, or jobs that never seem to work out, or a feeling of emptiness that you just can't shake. Well, what if I told you that these repeated struggles might be tests that you're failing over and over again? You see, when we fail to recognize and pass God's tests, we often find ourselves stuck in a spiritual rut. We don't grow, we don't evolve, and we don't move forward on our spiritual journey. It's like being held back a grade in school, but for your soul. And just like in school, if you keep failing the same test over and over, you don't get to move on to the next level. But it's not just about missing out on spiritual growth. Failing these tests can have real, tangible effects on our lives. When we fail to learn the lessons God is trying to teach us, we often find ourselves making the same mistakes over and over again. We might keep choosing the wrong partners, or making poor financial decisions, or struggling with the same character flaws year after year. And here's the really scary part. If we keep failing these tests, we might miss out on the blessings that God has in store for us. Imagine if God has an amazing opportunity lined up for you. Your dream job, your soulmate, or a chance to make a real difference in the world. But before He can give you that blessing, He needs to know that you're ready for it. He needs to know that you've learned the necessary lessons and developed the character to handle that blessing responsibly. So if you keep failing the tests, if you keep missing the lessons, you might be blocking your own blessings. You might be standing in the way of your own destiny. And that's a high price to pay for not recognizing a test when it comes your way. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. The fact that you're here, listening to this, means you're already on the right track. You're taking the first step towards recognizing these tests and learning how to pass them. And once you know what to look for, once you understand how God tests us and why, you'll be amazed at how quickly things can change in your life. Now that we understand why these tests are so important, let's take a bird's eye view of what we're dealing with. God doesn't just have one test or two. No, there are 5 key tests that He uses to gauge our spiritual readiness and worthiness. 5 tests that, if you can recognize and pass them, will catapult your spiritual growth and open doors you never even knew existed. These 5 tests aren't random. They're not thrown at us willy-nilly. Each one is carefully designed to test a specific aspect of our character, our faith, and our readiness for spiritual advancement. They're like a spiritual obstacle course, each obstacle testing a different skill, a different part of who we are. Now, I know what you're thinking. 5 tests? That sounds like a lot. But don't worry. These tests don't all come at once. They're spread out over our lives, popping up when we least expect them, often disguised as everyday challenges or seemingly random events. The key is learning to spot them, to see the divine purpose behind what might look like ordinary struggles. So, what are these 5 tests? Well, without giving too much away just yet, let me give you a little taste of what we're going to dive into. First, we have the test of faith. This one's a doozy, and it often shows up when we least expect it. It's all about trusting in God's plan, even when things look bleak. Then there's the test of character. This one's sneaky because it often comes disguised as a chance to take the easy way out. But God's watching to see if we'll do the right thing, even when it's hard. The third test is all about perseverance. Can you keep going when everything seems to be falling apart? That's what God wants to know. Fourth, we have the test of love and forgiveness. This one can be really tough, especially when we've been hurt, but it's crucial for our spiritual growth. And finally, there's the test of surrender. This might be the hardest one of all because it asks us to let go of control and trust completely in God's plan. Each of these tests is designed to push us, to challenge us, and ultimately, to help us grow. They're not about pass or fail in the traditional sense. It's not like God is standing there with a clipboard, giving us a grade. No, these tests are opportunities. Opportunities to learn, to grow, and to prove that we're ready for the next level of our spiritual journey. In this video, we're going to dive deep into each of these tests. We'll explore what they look like in real life, how to recognize them when they show up, and most importantly, how to pass them. We'll look at real-life examples, share practical tips, and give you the tools you need to ace these divine tests. But here's the thing. Knowing about these tests is just the first step. The real work comes in applying this knowledge to your life. It's about being aware, being prepared, and being ready to step up when God puts you to the test. So, are you ready to unlock the secrets of God's tests? Are you ready to take your spiritual journey to the next level? Are you ready to become worthy of the incredible blessings God has in store for you? Then let's dive in. Let's explore these 5 tests and learn how to pass them with flying colors. Your spiritual transformation starts now. Certainly. Here's the continuation of the script, covering the next 3 sections of the outline. Let's dive into the first of God's 5 tests, the test of faith. Now, when we talk about faith, we're not just talking about believing in God. We're talking about trusting in God's plan, even when that plan doesn't make any sense to us. Even when it feels like everything is falling apart. You see, the test of faith often comes when we're at our lowest point. When we've lost our job, when a relationship has ended, when we're facing a health crisis. It's in these moments, when everything seems darkest, that God asks us, "Do you still trust me?" Think about the story of Job in the Bible. Here was a man who had it all: wealth, family, health. And then, in what seemed like the blink of an eye, he lost everything. His wealth? Gone. His children? Taken. His health? Destroyed. And in the midst of all this suffering, Job's friends came to him and said, "You must have done something wrong. God must be punishing you." But Job refused to lose faith. Even in his darkest hour, he said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." That's the kind of faith God is looking for. The kind of faith that says, "I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that God has a plan." Now, you might be thinking, that's easy to say, but how do I actually do that? How do I keep faith when everything is falling apart? Well, here's the thing. Faith isn't about feeling. It's about choosing. It's about making a decision to trust God, even when your feelings are telling you to give up. One practical way to build this kind of faith is through gratitude. Even in your darkest moments, try to find something to be thankful for. Maybe it's as simple as the air you're breathing, or the fact that you woke up this morning. When you focus on what you're grateful for, it becomes easier to trust that God is still working, even when you can't see it. Another way to pass the test of faith is to remember God's faithfulness in the past. Think about times in your life when things seemed hopeless, but somehow worked out. Those weren't coincidences. They were God working behind the scenes. And if he did it before, he can do it again. The test of faith isn't easy. It's not supposed to be. But when we pass it, when we choose to trust God even in our darkest hours, we come out stronger. Our relationship with God deepens. And often, we find that God was working all along, in ways we couldn't see or understand at the time. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where everything seems to be going wrong, remember, this might be a test of faith. And you have a choice. Will you give in to doubt and fear? Or will you choose to trust, even when you can't see the way forward? The choice is yours. Now, let's move on to the second test, the test of character. This one's tricky because it often comes disguised as an opportunity to take the easy way out. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, even when doing the wrong thing might benefit you in the short term. You see, God isn't just interested in what we do in public. He's not impressed by our Sunday best or the face we put on for others. What God really cares about is who we are when no one's looking, because that's our true character. Think about it like this. Character is like a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it. And just like a muscle, it gets tested when it's under pressure. That's why the test of character often comes when we're faced with a difficult choice. Maybe it's finding a wallet full of cash with no ID. Do you keep it, or do you try to find the owner? Maybe it's being offered a promotion at work, but you know it would mean throwing a colleague under the bus. Do you take it, or do you stand up for what's right? These are the moments that test our character. Now, you might be thinking, but if no one knows, does it really matter? And the answer is a resounding yes. Because every time we choose to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when no one will know, we're shaping our character. We're becoming the person God created us to be. There's a story about a man who was offered a high-paying job, but it would require him to be dishonest in his business dealings. The money was tempting, and no one would ever know if he fudged the numbers a little. But he turned it down. Why? Because he knew that his integrity was worth more than any amount of money. That's the kind of character God is looking for. The kind that values integrity over personal gain. The kind that does the right thing, not for recognition or reward, but simply because it's right. So how do we pass the test of character? It starts with small decisions. Being honest in little things. Keeping promises, even when it's inconvenient. Treating people with kindness, even when they can't do anything for you. One practical tip is to imagine God is standing right next to you in every situation. Because in reality, He is. Would you make the same choice if you could physically see God watching you? That's the standard we're called to live by. Another way to build character is to surround yourself with people who have strong moral values. As the saying goes, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. So choose your company wisely. Remember, the test of character isn't about being perfect. We all make mistakes. But it's about consistently striving to do what's right, even when it's hard. Even when no one will know. Because in the end, God knows. And more importantly, now we come to the third test, the test of perseverance. This is where God asks, can you keep going when everything seems to be falling apart? It's about staying the course, even when the path is rocky and the destination seems impossibly far away. Perseverance isn't just about enduring. It's about enduring with purpose. It's about keeping your faith and your focus, even when life throws its worst at you. And let me tell you, this test can be one of the toughest. Think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. This guy had dreams of greatness, but before he could reach them, he was sold into slavery by his own brothers. Then, just when things seemed to be looking up, he was thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. For years, it must have seemed like his dreams were slipping away. But Joseph didn't give up. He didn't lose faith. He kept doing his best, whether as a slave or a prisoner. And eventually, all those trials led him to become second in command of all Egypt, in a position to save countless lives, including those of his own family. That's the kind of perseverance God is looking for. The kind that says, I don't know how long this will last, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep believing. I'm going to keep doing my best. Now, you might be thinking, that's easier said than done. How do I keep going when everything seems hopeless? Well, here's the thing. Perseverance isn't about feeling strong all the time. It's about taking one more step, even when you feel weak. One practical way to build perseverance is to break big challenges into smaller, manageable steps. Instead of focusing on the mountain you have to climb, focus on the next step in front of you. Celebrate small victories along the way. Each step forward, no matter how small, is progress. Another key to perseverance is to keep your eyes on the bigger picture. Remember why you started this journey in the first place. What's the goal you're working towards? What's the promise you're holding on to? When you keep your focus on the end goal, it becomes easier to push through the tough times. It's also important to remember that you're not alone in this test. Lean on your support system, your family, your friends, your faith community, and most importantly, lean on God. There's a beautiful promise in Isaiah 40 verse 31 that says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." The test of perseverance isn't about never feeling tired or discouraged. It's about getting back up when you fall. It's about taking one more step when you feel like you can't go on. It's about holding on to hope, even when hope seems foolish. Remember, diamonds are formed under pressure. Gold is refined by fire. And your character, your faith, your very spirit is strengthened through the test of perseverance. So when you find yourself in a situation that seems endless, when the light at the end of the tunnel is hard to see, remember, this might be the test of perseverance, and you have what it takes to pass it. Certainly. Here are the remaining sections of the script, followed by a conclusion. Now we come to the fourth test, and this one can be one of the most challenging, the test of love and forgiveness. This test often comes when we've been hurt deeply, when someone has wronged us in a way that seems unforgivable. It's in these moments that God asks us, "Can you love as I have loved you? Can you forgive as I have forgiven you?" You see, it's easy to love those who love us back. It's easy to forgive small slights. But God calls us to a higher standard. He calls us to love our enemies, to forgive those who have hurt us deeply. And let me tell you, that's not an easy thing to do. Think about the story of Jesus on the cross. Even as he was being crucified, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." That's the kind of love and forgiveness God is looking for. The kind that can look past the hurt and see the humanity in the other person. Now, you might be thinking, but they don't deserve forgiveness. They haven't even asked for it. And you're right, they might not deserve it. But here's the thing. Forgiveness isn't about what they deserve. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. It's about choosing to love, even when it's hard. One practical way to pass this test is to practice empathy. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. What might have led them to act the way they did? This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it can help you understand it, and understanding is often the first step towards forgiveness. Another key is to remember that forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. It's okay if you can't forgive completely right away. Start small. Maybe today you can just decide that you want to forgive. Maybe tomorrow you can pray for the person who hurt you. Small steps, taken consistently, can lead to big changes in your heart. It's also important to remember that forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to put yourself in a position to be hurt again. You can forgive someone and still set healthy boundaries. Forgiveness is about releasing the anger and resentment, not about putting yourself in harm's way. The test of love and forgiveness isn't easy. It might be the hardest test of all, but when we pass it, when we choose to love and forgive even those who have hurt us, we become more like God. We free ourselves from the prison of bitterness. And often, we find healing not just for ourselves, but for our relationships as well. We've arrived at the fifth and final test, the test of surrender. This might be the most challenging test of all because it goes against our natural instincts. It's about letting go of control and trusting completely in God's plan. In our world, we're taught to take charge, to make things happen, to be in control. But God's ways are often different from our ways. And sometimes, He asks us to surrender our plans, our desires, even our understanding of how things should work out. Think about Abraham in the Bible. God had promised him a son, but years went by and nothing happened. Then, when Abraham was 100 years old, the promise was finally fulfilled. But then God asked Abraham to sacrifice that son. Can you imagine how hard that must have been? Everything in Abraham must have screamed, "No, this is my son, the fulfillment of the promise." But Abraham chose to surrender, to trust God even when it didn't make sense. And in that moment of surrender, God provided. That's the kind of surrender God is looking for. The kind that says, "I don't understand, but I trust you. Your will, not mine, be done." Now, you might be thinking, but how do I surrender? How do I let go of control? Well, it starts with recognizing that we're not really in control anyway. So much of life is beyond our control. The circumstances we're born into, the actions of others, even the beating of our own hearts. When we realize this, it becomes easier to surrender to the one who is in control. One practical way to practice surrender is through prayer. Instead of telling God what you want him to do, try asking, "God, what do you want to do through me?" This shifts our focus from our plans to God's plans. Another key is to practice contentment. The Apostle Paul said he had learned to be content in all circumstances. That's surrender, accepting where you are, even as you work towards where you want to be. It's also important to remember that surrender isn't a one-time thing. It's a daily choice, sometimes a moment-by-moment choice. Each time we face a situation we can't control, we have the opportunity to practice surrender. The test of surrender isn't about giving up. It's about giving over our plans, our desires, our very selves to God. And when we do, we often find that God's plans are bigger and better than anything we could have imagined. Now that we've explored the 5 tests God uses, you might be wondering, how do I put this into practice? How do I recognize these tests when they come, and how do I pass them? Well, the first step is awareness. Now that you know about these tests, you'll start to see them in your life. That difficult situation at work, it might be a test of character. That grudge you've been holding, it could be a test of forgiveness. One practical tip is to start each day with a prayer of surrender. Something like, "God, I give this day to you. Help me to recognize your tests and to respond in a way that pleases you." This sets your mind in the right place to face whatever the day brings. Another key is to develop a habit of self-reflection. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to think back over your experiences. Were there moments that challenged your faith, your character, your perseverance? How did you respond? This practice can help you become more aware of God's tests in your life. It's also important to remember that these tests often come in everyday situations. It's not always big, dramatic events. Sometimes it's in how you respond to a rude cashier, or whether you choose to help a stranger in need. Every moment is an opportunity to grow closer to God. One powerful practice is to keep a God test journal. When you recognize one of these tests in your life, write it down. Describe the situation, how you responded, and what you learned. Over time, you'll start to see patterns and growth in your spiritual journey. Remember, the goal isn't to pass these tests perfectly every time. We all stumble and fall. The goal is growth. Each time we face one of these tests, it's an opportunity to grow stronger in our faith, to become more like the person God created us to be. As we wrap up our exploration of God's 5 tests, it's important to remember that these tests aren't about pass or fail. They're about growth. They're about becoming the person God created you to be. Think of it like this. Just as a loving parent challenges their child to grow and learn, God uses these tests to help us grow spiritually. Each test, whether we pass it or not, is an opportunity to learn, to become stronger, to draw closer to God. Remember, God doesn't expect perfection. He knows we'll stumble and fall. What he's looking for is progress. He's looking for a heart that's willing to learn, to grow, to keep trying even when it's hard. So as you go forward from here, keep your eyes open for these tests in your life. When you face a challenge to your faith, remember the test of faith. When you're tempted to take the easy way out, remember the test of character. When life gets tough and you want to give up, remember the test of perseverance. When someone hurts you deeply, remember the test of love and forgiveness. And when you feel like you're losing control, Remember the test of surrender. These tests will come. They're part of the journey. But now you have the tools to recognize them, to understand them, and to grow through them. And here's the beautiful thing. As you face these tests, as you grow through them, you'll find yourself changing. You'll find your faith becoming stronger, your character becoming more Christ-like, your ability to persevere growing, your capacity for love and forgiveness expanding, and your trust in God deepening. This journey of spiritual growth isn't always easy. There will be times when you feel like you're failing every test that comes your way. But don't give up. Remember, even the greatest saints had their struggles. What made them great wasn't that they never failed, but that they never stopped trying. So embrace these tests. See them for what they are: opportunities for growth, chances to draw closer to God. And as you do, you'll find yourself becoming more and more the person God created you to be, a person of faith, of character, of perseverance, of love, and of surrender. Your journey of spiritual growth starts now. Are you ready to embrace it? Are you ready to face God's tests with courage and faith? The choice is yours. And remember, God is with you every step of the way. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of God's 5 tests. May you go forward with new understanding, new strength, and new hope for your spiritual journey. God bless you all.